All right, welcome everybody. We'll just wait a few seconds for everybody to join in. Hopefully you have good audio, you hear us well. You should already see something on your screen.
Hey, Ben, got it.
Okay, and we'll all right, and I'll let Jack entertain us with his knowledge. Thank you.
There you go. Can anyone hear me? Yeah. So welcome to our presets and moving black webinar. I'm afraid you've got me hosting today's show as Ben's off somewhere else. So yeah, same as usual. I'm going to take you through some features. If this is your first webinar with us, feel free to put any questions typed in the chat, and Paul will try his best to help them, or perhaps just interrupt me and shout them out as we go through. Yeah, so with that, let's get to it. To begin with, I'm just going to explain what a preset is and why they're useful. So primarily, presets, you can think of them as programming templates to help speed up the creation of your stage looks. In this show file that I'm working on right now, you can see I've got some stored down here as well. So if we select some fixtures and turn them on, I can use any of these preset positions that I've made to quickly get my lights on the guitarist or my band members or the singer. I don't have to spend time manually adjusting each fixture to that position. So it speeds up workflow. That's useful thing number one. But the main use for them is that they act as reference points within queues that we're storing, so that every time we update those reference points, these presets, they can update multiple queues all at the same time for us. So if I actually just program this as an example, let's just store this as queue number one. And then in queue number two, I'll change to my band position, let's say in a different color. And in queue number three, we'll come back to the singer. So let's just store that as well. So here are my queues. This is number one. This is number two. And queue number three. So if we were programming, if I just release this queue list, and let's just change this position, for argument's sake, let's just go up in the air and fanned in. I'll come back to explain this in a little bit more detail later, but if I just update this preset by right-clicking and pressing update, we're updating this reference point. So the idea here is that then follows through into your queues. So if I play back my queue number one, it's now referencing that new position. It then comes down to the band and then goes up in the air for the next one. The reason these two stayed up here is because this is using something called an embedded preset, which I'll explain a little bit later in the video. Something that I actually forgot to do in this morning's webinar, but there you go. So in this show file, I'm just going to delete all of my presets that I've got stored in here already, just so we can start everything from the beginning. So there we are. So if I take some fixtures, let's turn these on. Just zoom out a little bit here. And if I put these at the front of my stage in a color, we can store a preset of this information. So to store a preset, you can find the preset in any of the component sections. And my personal preferred way of doing it is you can right click and press create new preset, and the create new preset window pops up. You can also find this create new preset option within the components drop down menu just here, or also on a soft key, which is the green or alt key by default. The same contextual window pops up when you click it. So we can give the new preset a name. Let's call this yellow at the front. Vista automatically realizes what features are actually active. So you can see that here we store position and color. Typically, we don't store intensity by default in our presets, but you can choose to add that by toggling these features on or off. And these feature icons are the same as any of the other feature buttons that are seen in the software. So intensity, position, color, gobo, beam, miscellaneous, and some advanced features, which I'll get onto a little bit later on as well. The arrows are just a quick way of deselecting and selecting all features. So for now, we're going to be storing position and color. Before we move on to the next bit, it's important to explain that when we store a preset, there's actually 3 levels of things that can be stored, and Vista looks to a hierarchy of these 3 things to determine which is best to use. And these things are something called a global value, which means that it can be applied to any fixture in your show, a fixture type value, which can just be applied to that exact make and model of fixture, and then the individual fixtures that you're creating that preset on. So there's 3 levels. And the way it works, it looks to the individual fixture information first. If it hasn't got that, it will use the fixture type values. And if it hasn't got that, only then will it go up and use the global value. I'm mentioning that now because that's something that's important to understand, and also to know that the console's worked out that it can create a global value for us in this case. And the reason it's worked that out is because the stage state on stage right now only includes a single look, which is forwards and yellow. Even though it's on multiple fixtures, they're both doing the exact same thing, so therefore it knows which global value we mean. So let's take a look at this. So here's my yellow front preset. And because we stored that global event, it means that we can select any fixtures in our show, turn them on, and click this preset, and they go to the same raw position and color because it's global. If I clear my programmer and do another example, let's take these 2 fixtures. We'll turn these to cyan. And we'll do the same thing again. Right click, create new preset, cyan front. This time I'll demonstrate not global, so we'll untick this, but we'll create fixture type values. So what this means is that this will let me apply this preset to the same model of fixture, which is these viper spots in this example. So we can apply that same look. If I try and apply that to any other fixture in my show, though, we can see that this is grayed out because this preset doesn't contain information for these fixtures. We could add that manually if we wish. So if I show you how to do that, we'll just take these up in the air for argument's sake, and we'll pick a color here, like this. To update a preset, what we can do is we right click it, and then from the menu that appears, we can press update preset, and the update preset window appears. Again, you can be choosing position and color for the features. And in this example, I'd be just updating the preset with just these 2 fixtures. But if I want, I could add in a fixture type value, which means that this value would also be able to be applied to the other pointies that aren't selected right now. So if we demonstrate this, let's clear the programmer and do the same thing again. We should see that. So now these other fixtures are using the fixture type event that I'd programmed in this preset here. If we do another example, let's go magenta up in the air. If none of these boxes are ticked, it means that the preset information that we're storing is only applicable to these selected fixtures just here. So again, if I demonstrate this, if I select other fixtures, then this is grayed out, it's not applicable. It's only applicable to the fixtures that I created this on. Another way of editing presets is we can right click and press edit. And when we do this, we actually see the events in the timeline view. So in this first preset, I stored 2 colors and 2 positions for these 2 fixtures just here. But you can see that additional event that I saw we stored as well, which is the global event. So this is the value that's going to be applied to any fixture that's not these 2, basically, because it's using the global value. You can adjust that here as well if you need to. You can change that. So if I go blue here, what would happen if I show you this example is all fixtures would go blue because they're using the global value, apart from these 2, which are using their individual fixture values here. If I edit this again, sometimes you might forget to store fixture type or global values. A lesser known fact within this edit is you can actually right click and press set as default value for all fixtures. So this would then program a global value based on what selected, or fixture type value. So if I press fixture type, we'll then be adding a fixture type event for all of the Viper spots as well. So that's just a little tip just there. So let's close that. What else can we talk about? If I just play back my, in fact, let's just make another Q list. And we'll use a new position. Let's make a cross position. Like that. So we'll keep this Q list active. It's this Q list here, number 2. And let's just add in some color information and some gobos in here as well. So let's say I wanted to make a preset of this information. If I create a new preset from here, we'll call this yellow cross. What we've picked up here in terms of the features that we can, or it wants to store, is just color and gobo. The reason these 2 are ticked is because this information is what's coming from the current queue. And the current queue, when working in the programmer, is exactly that. It's the live tab. So don't be confused about the current queue naming just here. But in this example, if I wanted to pick up the position as well, which is coming from outside of the programmer, I'd need to change this output box to not just the current queue, which is the programmer, but to all output. And in this situation, then I can toggle features that are outside this single source. So if we demonstrate that now, if I clear the programmer, release the queue list, turn those lights back on, and now click this preset, then that's picked up and stored all of that information in there as well. While we're talking about contents and features, I'm just going to adjust the iris here and also the zoom and focus. So if I was to store a preset of whatever this beam information is, the beam itself or any feature is toggling on and off all the features contained within that feature class. So this would be iris, focus, and zoom. So that's where the ... advanced tab can come in handy. If we click this, we can see the same feature filters as before, but this time we can expand and go down to individual parameter details of that feature class. For example, if I want to store zoom only, but forget iris, focus, and frost, then this is how you would achieve that by ticking these boxes just here as well. So I think there's one last thing to talk about within this window itself, which is the update options, which is merge and replace. So let's go back to my first example, let's say of the sign at the front, which we didn't include information for these fixtures at the back. So let's just make something for these guys. We'll just put them up in the air so we can see what's happening. So if I right click and press update, would be adding these fixtures with these features into this preset, and the default option is to merge, so we're adding that in. It's an addition. But the second option is completely replace it, so that will throw away anything that was existing there before and just leave you with just the new content that you're creating. So if we do that, Let's do that again. So now I can apply it to these two, but everything else is now not applicable because we've just effectively deleted it. Are there any questions there, Paul, in the chat about the creation of presets from there?
I just got actually one question, which is more of a future feature. The question is, when do we get a global master preset for positioning, which basically use X, Y, Z, so you can realign all the preset based on targeting a certain amount of points, basically, on the stage.
I don't think we'd ever have the height coordinate, but if you, an advanced transform is a way that you could do that. For example, in this example here, if you take this fixture as an example here, this one, if you went to it in the patch level, I went to the transforms and added a pan transform, then if you then use the offset, you can see you can nudge it around. So if this was slightly off, you just nudge it to where it is in terms of the degrees here. And then because you're doing at the patch level, in theory, all of your presets should then be matching up because you've adjusted it at a higher level. So that's the best tip that I could give at this stage within the current implementation of just doing it at a level above that.
So everybody understand, like, in order to do what Mikhail is asking there, it would require a lot of knowledge, basically, from the stage. So you need to know where all the fixtures are, and where the size matter, like only not only the position but the angle and everything. And then from there, you need to recalculate everything. And so it is possible, it exists. But it's far more complicated. You need a 3D world logic within the software.
That's really accurate as well, which they seldom are. But advanced transforms and offsetting those pans and tilts is a quick way of just adjusting a couple of fixtures and having it transfer through to all of your other presets as well. So the next thing to talk about is preset filtering, or component filtering. Actually applies to all components such as extracts and other things, but primarily presets. And the filtering is on this drop down box here to the right of it. So if I show you Gobo, or as an example, intensity, it's not showing anything because we haven't stored any intensity presets yet. If I show you all, and I show you presets of position over here, what's happening when we apply the presets from these filters is it only applies this feature. So if I take my yellow cross, I'm only applying this position. So I could apply my yellow cross from here, but with my magenta color on these ones. So you can pick and choose what you're taking from here. So you don't have to always apply all contents as you would here. You can filter it. It's one of the advantages of being able to store multiple parameters within a single preset. That's also something to bear in mind if you are creating a stage state. For example, this green position just here. If you create the position or the preset, sorry, from the position filter, even though you've got color in the programmer, it will automatically filter out that just a position. So it's just something to be aware of. Whereas if you create it from the all feature palette, it will automatically be picking up all features that are in there. So I'm just going to create a quick preset of my singer position just here, just on these two fixtures just here. So we'll create a new preset and call this singer, which is good. And we'll apply that. And what I can then do, because I've applied this, let me just make another position somewhere on these guys. Let's just say fan these out like that, and then we'll copy that to these guys just here. So let's say this is the preset that I want to store, an additional preset. So let's just call this look one. and I'm storing position and color. You can also choose to display previews if you like. I haven't mentioned that before. It's just to show you what the fixtures are doing. So let's store look 1. Here it is. So I'll just show you that again. So looks like this, exactly as I've just stored it. What I'm trying to get to now is just that example of embedded presets. So what that means is when you create a preset from another preset, if you update the original source content, it will also filter through to your additional presets as well. So if we do that same example, let's just take the singer preset, so the one that I made first, and if I now just move that off to say this guy over here and update the singer position, not only does that update this one, but if I was to apply that look 1 to this, then it will be referencing that new point as well. So that's just a demonstration that the presets are linked to each other, just like cues are, if you've created them from that, which is handy. So I think that pretty much covers it from the actual programming presets side of things. The next thing that I want to talk about is the home preset, which is a show file default value for a certain channel or feature. Before I demonstrate this, I'm actually going to open up my other show file example that I had, just because I want to use some of the presets that I had before. So let's say that we want to take these fixtures in the color blue on my band position just here. To update the home preset, what you do is you right click in an empty space and you come down to home and press update. So you get the same update preset information as before, and I'm going to record position and color into this preset. So if we now change something, when we press the clear button, what's going to happen now, because I've updated that home preset, is they're not going to go to their fixture default, which would normally be straight down position and the color white. They're going to go to that show file default, which is the color blue in my band position just here. So that can be useful if you're working in a live sort of busking scenario, or a get out of jail free card if you need to adjust a certain channel on a fixture, for example. It's important to mention that for this to work, which is on by default, the user preference for using the home preset when clearing fixtures must be turned on. If this is turned off, what will happen is the fixtures will always return to their fixture default, which is straight down and white. The only time the home preset value is then useful to you is if you're actually explicitly giving it a home command, which will be on the yellow modify button, or in any time you see the actual home button of the feature. So if I home the color now, it's going to go blue. If I home the position, it's going to go to my band position just here. So just a couple of different ways of working with that. Personally, I like to have it come to that when I'm pressing clear from there as well. To reset the home preset, you can right click and just press reset, and then it will go back to the fixture type default just here. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the highlight and low light preset. The highlight key is up here on the function key toolbar. By default, it's F4. And when it's on, it means that when you select fixtures, they're turned to 100% intensity. And if it's a color mixing fixture, the color will also change to white. So what's happening here? So if I select all of these fixtures, remember you can use your left and right keys on your keyboard to move forwards and backwards down your selection. And it's the selected fixture, the one with the yellow border, which is using the highlight preset. All of the ones in red will be using the low light preset, which we'll get to in a minute. Of course, the main function of highlight is just to give you programming tools to clearly be able to see what you're doing to focus these lights on certain positions. So I can just quickly bump through these and focus my lights on this guy just here. So that's the highlight preset. You can change it as well as the low light. So let's say that we want to change the low light preset. By default, there isn't one set, it's clear. But in this example, I'm going to turn my lights to 50% blue and update the low light preset. So we go to right click, low light, and press update. And I'm going to update the intensity and the color here. So if we imagine we're programming this, let's say we're programming 100% red. This is the actual end state that I want to program. What I can do now is turn on highlight, and then when I bump through these, you can see all of the ones are now using the low light preset. So it's 50% blue. So again, so I can do a similar thing and position these lights wherever I want to. But now when I click away, it's going to return back to the actual stage state that I want to program, which is 100% red in this example. Any questions on highlight or low light there? Let me have a look. No.
No, you're doing far. Oh, there's a question that just came. It seems like the global value.
Yeah, I can see it. I've got it up on my
good.
screen. I mean, global is useful most of the time. So one for fixture type. So imagine an example whereby, let's just take something here. Let's say we've made this. Let's say we've made this new yellow preset. We'll just do this. X yellow, and then you could decide that actually we need to bring in some additional fixtures and adjust this. WYSIWYG or visualizers are always quite good at the colors, but often in real life, fixtures will never have the exact color. So for argument's sake, let's just say this orange is a natural to the eye real world fixture match. What I could do here is I could update this preset, but I don't want to just update it for just these two because I might want to use this color later on. So what I can do is I can update the fixture type values for these pointers, which means that anytime I later use this Jack's yellow color, then it's going to be using that for these fixtures just here as well. So it can just be a quick way. You don't have to go in there, select this, pick the same color and update it. It can just be a quicker way of doing that. And individual fixtures, you could have a completely dodgy fixture, for example, or worn out lamps or LEDs, and you might need to make this one be this color yellow for a color match. So in that case, you would update just the individual fixture information for these two just in here, so that when we eventually turn on all of that stuff together, it's going to be using the right color when we apply that, if that makes any sense. Cool. So I think that pretty much covers preset creation and use. So we can move on to talking about mark cues and moving black. So let's create a new cue list. And we'll put these fixtures in a position and a color. And we'll also turn on some dimmers here as well. Cool. We'll create cue number 2. In cue number 2, we'll turn these lights off. And in cue number 3, we'll turn them on, up in the air, changing color, and adding in a gobo in there as well. So this is the cue list. This is cue number 1. Cue number 2, these lights fade off to 0%. And then in cue number 3, they turn back on, fly up to the air, change color, and add the gobo. So therefore, when we go from Q2 to Q3, we visually see that movement. Of course, sometimes that's exactly what we want to see, but sometimes we don't want to see the move. So we can use mark Qs on moving black to help us. The easiest way that I can teach how to do this is within the live edit. So the QList tablet's open here. We can right click a Q and press mark Q, moving black. So with this, the default option is to put the move into the queue before as soon as it goes off. So that's it. You can mask certain features or fixtures, but in this example, I'm going to show all features and the current selection. So let's take a look at this. If you actually just take a look at the fixture chooser view for this next bit. So it's the queue number 1. In queue number 2, what we see is these lights fading out in 2 seconds. And then as soon as they hit 0, they're going to move into their new position, new color, and new gobo. The queue then halts and waits for you to press play on queue number 3. So they fade up in that position just there. So we don't see the move. The advantage of using the feature within Vista is that we can now just alter the look of this queue and we don't need to worry about anything else. We could make it go white and change to a completely different position. We don't need to worry about anything else. The lights will fade out, then move to that updated position and fade back in on the new position. So that's an advantage. You don't have to do it manually by copying and pasting or reprogramming events or changing stuff in the timeline. I'm just going to press Control Z a couple of times and go all the way back before I marked the queue, because I want to show you that with the additional options that are in that mark window. So again, I'm going to right click, press Mark Queue, and this time demonstrate this option, which is to insert a new moving black queue, which is going to program Q 2.5 for me. There's some advantages to doing it this way. In the previous example, the time the movement takes to go from the singer to my new position is the same time as the queue before. So it faded down in 2 seconds, so therefore it has to fade up and change, move and change color in 2 seconds. But by inserting a new moving black queue, we have the option to shorten or lengthen the time. So this can be useful. For example, you might want to lengthen the time so it's slower and quieter, or you might need to get there as soon as possible if you're doing a rock and roll show or something like that. So let's take a look at 5 seconds and we'll call it Jack's moving black. Just here. So here it is. Here's the queue. It's also set it to become auto follow with the length of 5 seconds. So if we play this back, we have a 2-second fade out. This time auto following with a 5-second move, which then halts and waits for me to press play on cue number 3. So the end result to the audience is exactly the same. It's just programmed slightly differently. If I'm doing a theatrical cue stack, I personally prefer this option because if this is playing back, I can see this is the move. Don't be too trigger happy on cue number 3. Okay, that's complete. Now we can play cue number 3, and no, we're not going to see any moves when working in this way. If we undo once again and just reverse, and this time let's just add in some additional cues in between 2 and 3. So let's just say we're going to add in, let's add in some red dimmers, and then we'll add in some amber ones, just for demonstration purposes. So the lights go off here, and then they come back on again in cue number 3. So we're still going to see that fly up in cue number 3, just there. When we do the mark queue, as I mentioned at the beginning, the default action is to put this movement into the queue before. So it's going to make it happen in 2.6. But if you know, for example, that these lights are going off in Q2, you could choose to have that happening in a different queue. So you're just able to select a different queue number other than simply the one before. So we should be able to see that happening here. Just take a look. So the lights go off. Now they move in this queue as opposed to this one. We won't see any change there. And now, of course, they fade up in Q number 3 as normal. So that pretty much concludes all of the options in here, other than the fact that you can disable it yourself. If you don't want to have that anymore, then of course you'd then be seeing the movement as you would expect. There is another move in black setting which is called auto move in black, which is at a Q list property level. So if I show you this, let's right click and come into the Q list properties, and we can find the auto move in black setting just here. We will be doing another webinar in the future on the entire contents of this Q list properties window, but for now we're just going to be talking about this feature here. So let's turn this on. You can specify a minimum move in black length. By default, this is 1 second, and we'll just OK. So when we're using auto move in black, this is noted in the Q list by little yellow labels as opposed to gray ones. And what auto move in black does is it just marks every single Q, almost just in case, and it always puts the movement in the Q before. So in the case of Q number 3, when we play into Q number 2.6, we're seeing these lights get ready in their position. So we can again turn on these lights just here. But the advantage of using auto move in black is it can save you a little bit of time if you're just working in a theatrical Q list, for example. So if I program Q number 2, let's turn on these lights. Let's put them in the singer just here. Let's do this as well, just so we can see what's happening. So what would happen now in this Q before, we're seeing them get ready just to fade up just here. So if I do a similar example again, let's turn on these fixtures and we'll put them on, I don't know, we'll go for the singer just so you can see that a little bit clearer. So again, you'd never see this move because it would always be getting ready in the Q before. But if you're working in an auto move in black Q list, you kind of have to work the opposite way around. If you decide you do want to see a move for, let's say, these 4 fixtures, what you have to do is you have to go to the timeline view, select the events that you want to see, come to the timeline menu, and then come down to ignore move in black and turn this option on, and you'll see it here. So now when we play back this Q list, we will physically see these lights getting into position. So it's just the opposite way of thinking. We just pull up the chat. Do we have any questions about move in black? I'll come back to your question, Stephen, about pan tilt presets in a second. Or now, if nobody else has got any questions on that. If you do, feel free to type away. Splitting pan and tilt presets can be useful just to save you some time, but it's all personal preference. It's completely up to you. So an example of this, let's take a look. Oops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fan the lights out, let's say, just for argument's sake. I'm going to create a new position preset, but in this example, it's storing both pan and tilt together, so it would be exactly this stage state just here. If I just come down into position and I'm just going to store the pan value here. So we can store that, fan out. We'll then just do the opposite of this. We'll fan in. Obviously, you could spend more time doing this. I'm just going to check my property here. Just store the pan again. So fan in. And we'll do one more. Let's just clear the pan there. We'll just do it crossed. So we've got fan out, fan in, and cross. If I now do the same thing for position, sorry, tilt, and I'll do, let's say, down to the opposite, so just draw the tilt. We'll do audience mid. And finally, up in the air. So now, because I've stored them all separately, I've got more flexibility. I can do, no, that was the wrong one. I can do fan out, fan in, or crossed up in the air, or I can choose to do this in the down position, fan out, fan in, crossed, or mid fan out, fan in, crossed. So instead of having to do 3 times the number of presets where they're all linked together, you can just choose pan values and tilt values. So again, that's just personal preference, but it is useful if you're working on the fly. It just saves the number of presets that you need to make. Must have been strong coffee. I've gone a little bit faster than I did in this morning's webinar. Does anybody have any other questions?
So we are recording all the sessions, and we will make them available on YouTube. So if you want to review, or if you want to see something there and you're not sure how, you can always play back those videos. So probably sometime later this week.
Should be tomorrow, hopefully.
Can you put time in a preset?
You can use live timing. So if I'd used live timing, which by default is on the second fader if you're using an EX, or this time up here. So let's go for 5 seconds. Now when I change to these, that you can fade in over live time.
This Vista file, can it be available for download?
I think it might already be there. I know Ben and I were discussing putting this on the website. I actually think it's actually there. If you go to the download page of Vista, it's actually there as a demo file. In YouTube, if you just search for Vista by Chroma-Q, you'll see the channel on there. It's a dedicated channel to Vista, independent of the Chroma-Q channel. Feel free to subscribe if you want to be notified when we post content there.
Any more questions for Jack at this point? Well, I guess not. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, there's one more. If I'm working live, the only way to have time and preset is that way. I guess yes, right?
You mean changing the number of the box at the top of here?
Yes.
Yes and no. My way of doing it is actually to use a snapshot. As you can see, I've got some here already. So if I want to do 5 seconds and then change the position, I can do that. If I want to snap the color or fade the color, I can change that. So you can see that when I'm applying these snapshots, I'm actually changing the lifetime value at the top. And to create these, you simply type a number in here, for example, 15. Create a snapshot and just record live timing. So I've now got myself a nice big touchscreen button over here that I can put different places. So this is typically how I prefer to do it. Some people like to use the fader. Personally, I like to use touchscreen buttons like that.
If you're recalling cues out of order, is there any moving black option?
No, because it won't know where it's coming from. Although I think in next week's Thursday webinar, we're going to be talking about scenarios such as, for example, live music playback, where you're moving from one cue list, which might be one song, to another cue list, which is another song completely out of order because the band have just gone crazy and changed it. So with that, we'll be talking about how you can transition from one state to another one cleanly, which might help. So that should be next Thursday, not tomorrow, but next Thursday. Let me just see. Yeah, exactly like a real event. Yeah. Let me just see. Should be there. Let me take a look for you quickly. So you go to the download section. I lied to you. It's not there. If you give me just a couple of minutes, I'll upload it to this place in just a second. So literally 10 seconds after the webinar, if you take a look at this page, it should be in here as well. Yeah, and I'll also possibly include the WYSIWYG sample file. You can download the demo version of WYSIWYG, which is free, and connect that as well if you want. So check there after the webinar and you should see it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack. So thank you, everyone. And there's another session
Tomorrow.
tomorrow, actually, right?
Yeah, yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
Subject tomorrow? What's the topic tomorrow?
Tomorrow's topic is aimed at working with structured cue lists. So the idea is if you're theatrical programming or corporate AV, when you're working with long structured lists, we'll also be talking about the command line in some way, the way that interacts in synergy with the graphical interface. We won't be talking about all options of the command line, but just explaining how it thinks, and I'll be giving some of my personal favorite shortcuts as well.
Great. All right. Well, see you.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you next one.
Bye.